Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is another big event here. One of the most important things to talk about in terms of the apocalypse and the collapse. So let's get into this stuff first, and I'll explain why. Northern lights could be visible in all of the Britain tonight, according to Cornwall, because of a severe geomagnetic storm that threatens to disrupt world's power grids, mobile phones, networks, and GPS satellites. And um, there's this, right? So this is the northern lights, which are now people are being able to see much farther south, right? So the northern lights for a reason, because you can only see it in the north, but now you're able to see it farther south, which we'll get into in a bit. And so severe solar storm hitting Earth may make northern lights what to know. So people are seeing the northern lights in places that you could never see them before. And we've entered into a time where there's going to be a lot of solar storms. Somebody sent me something. I don't know what happened to it. I don't have it now, but there's some guy talking about severe weather events and how there's solar storms are now. It's just like we're hitting a prevalent time, which is bad for a lot of reasons, because solar storms and the magnetic pole shifting is something that's potentially devastating. Okay, so I've been covering this for years. There's a guy named Matt Stein who is a former MIT, and he's an MIT professor, graduate scientific person. And he wrote a book called 100 Chernobyls. I have a EMF, like just a compilation of images that I have from a folder. And in that, it has all these solar, the idea of the magnetic poles shifting. So I saw this maybe like 20 years ago, and it was like something on one of those scientific shows, Nova or something like that, right? And like PBS. And there's a mainstream science theory that I don't believe to be a theory, that the poles reverse themselves. North becomes south and south becomes north every 200,000 years. And it's been like 250,000 years since the last one. And when that happens, there is the potential for a solar flare to hit Earth and just wipe out the power grid. Because the magnetic field is what protects the Earth from solar flares. The sun releases these bursts of energy, quite often. And the magnetic field blocks the energy from hitting the Earth. It sort of shorts it out. It's like a ground wire, right? You have this sometimes wires. There's one house that we had that had these metal like poles sticking out of the roof. Short, they were just like a little bit like an antenna, and then there was a thick metal cable that went down to the ground as a ground wire, and then there was a piece of metal that was cemented into the ground if the house was struck by lightning, it would take the electricity and send it into the ground, right? Which is best case scenario. We had at a different house that I lived years ago. There was a tree that was hit by electricity, and I went and found the tree the next day, and there was a split going down the bark, and at the bottom of the tree there was an old metal fence that had grown into the tree, and when the electricity hit the fence, it ground out, right? So that it stopped there. It could have caused like fires and things, but the electricity was dissipated, and so in a different way, the magnetic field blocks the solar energy from entering Earth and causing havoc, and it would cause havoc beyond just our modern day technology. But this guy Matt Stein had theorized, there was a solar flare that hit somewhere. I don't know, it was Africa or South America or something like this, and wiped out all this electric grid. And there are these various electric components that are at the hubs of these electricity stations, and these things can get blown out. And there's only like one company that makes them, and it takes years to make these pieces. And if all these various transformers blew out, there'd be no way to replace them. And there are all these nuclear power plants that have like generators, like a week's worth of energy, like a week's worth of electricity to run the pumps and things to keep the nuclear power plants from malfunctioning, right, and going, China syndrome, because they have these pools of radioactive rods, and they get too hot. We've seen this before, and so there's no electricity, and the electricity is coming from these power plants. That if the electrical grid is down, and as soon as the generators, they have these giant generators, it takes a lot of electricity to pump the water through these cooling tanks, and if they only have a week's worth of electricity there, then all these nuclear power plants, and there's hundreds of them in America, could melt down. So you would have what he called 100 Chernobyls in his book, right? And that's just one theory about it. But either way, there could be a massive outage of electricity because of these, solar flares and the northern lights. And one of the signs that the magnetic poles are shifting is that you can see the northern lights everywhere. Where you just could see them in the north, now you can see them much farther south, because the magnetic poles are fluctuating, causing an opening of there becomes a vulnerability there, and the lights now hit at a different level, a different part of the hemisphere, and it goes down to a more southern part of the northern hemisphere. And so if we start seeing northern lights, which we are, that's a sign that the poles are starting to fluctuate. They're not as stable as they were. And so we're only a short time away from poles reversing themselves, right? And so there's that aspect of it. And so I've known about that for a long time, and the potential of that being some kind of catastrophe or upheaval, as it's called in these Whispers of the Brighter World messages. There's these channeled messages from this medium, this French woman, who was receiving messages from Babaji, the second master of the Scientific system that I do. And, those of you who don't believe it, it's fine. I'm just conveying the information. But this is, to me, a spiritual confirmation of something that is, there's scientific data out there. See, the way they found out about the poles reversing themselves, they were able to measure the ice caps, and they could determine there was information within the layers of the glaciers that showed when the solar flares had happened. And they were every 200,000 years. The poles just reverse themselves like magnetic, it'd be like your magnet. Now it would flip polarities, right? And so this is the message. This is February 25th, 2001. This is the message. These are messages written from the second master Babaji, or given through channeling to this French woman who he calls my daughter. My dear daughter, we would like to start giving you messages from a totally different content. Scientists are very often mistaken in their assertions. In a century, these assertions will be outdated. Man will have taken a step forward in his understanding of the laws governing the universe. They will then become obvious to a great number of minds capable of understanding the real meaning. Significant changes will take place on Earth's globe after great upheavals have occurred. Even the best established structures will be disrupted, and the elements will make life difficult for human beings who will have to face up to things. Another race stronger and having a much more developed sense of extrasensory perception will set up a world that would astonish most men living in the present. So there's this idea there's going to be a genetic mutation in a spiritual, like a spiritual movement where people are going to evolve and change in ways that, that we can't possibly understand, right? There's more about that. I'm not going to talk about that here. I've talked about that in a lot of different videos. When the poles are reversed, they will generate great climatic changes. So this is the pole reversal. When the poles are reversed, they will generate great climatic changes. Men will need to adjust themselves. A large part of the population, its present proportions, will have disappeared. The Earth will start a new era, best suited to its evolution. We will further elaborate on some of the mentioned topics, and you'll have to note down without wondering too much, even though you can't verify the soundness of what you are writing. These predictions should neither worry or embarrass you. They do not relate to your present day, and a long time will have passed before all our assertions come true. You will need to trust in us and leave your usual doubt aside. She was freaked out by this because she was just this woman was like an invalid. She had fell off the horse when she was younger and had an operation. She had wealth. She was a rich French, she was part of a rich French family. Fell off a horse when she was a kid. She had a doctor that she called the butcher that messed up her back, and she was in physical pain and couldn't really leave her apartment for most of her life. And then she had a past life as a Christian saint and who was a channeler, and then some other lives that made her good at her soul was good at receiving these kind of messages. But she was constantly always questioning like her sanity and whether this was actually happening. And then when Babaji started to do these predictions, she kind of freaked out. They do not relate to your present day, and a long time will have passed before all our assertions come true. You'll need to trust us and leave your usual doubt aside. These writings will long remain in oblivion before they could be made public. Therefore, it suits you to consider them as fiction. We have no objection to that. Don't worry, you are not under the influence of any devious spirit, and we will resume tomorrow the normal course of talks. Be at peace. Be blessed, Babaji. So that was interesting. Like he used to have to say these things a lot where she would be freaked out by something. But then there was another message that said this. These were part of the prophecies. The normal messages were just about spirituality and meditation and loving God, and those are about 90% of the messages. Some of them are about personal things with this woman, the masters of the system, and some other things going on in the mission. But then there are these prophecies and talking about electromagnetic pollution, like Wi-Fi and 5G and things like that. Talking about in 2000 and saying that this stuff was coming and it was going to be disruptive and all these other things. And then there's these prophecies. Wednesday, February 28th, 2001. So these were similar messages that came out at a very similar time, right? The previous message I just read was February 25th, and then 3 days later, there's this one. In a quarter of a century, the Earth will experience a major turbulence. So this is in 2001 in February. So this would be 2006 in February if it was to the day. So he's saying a quarter of a century. So 25 years would be 2025 December, 2026 January, February, but sometime around there. So coming pretty soon, like in the next couple of years. In a quarter of a century, the Earth will experience a major turbulence that will be the beginning of a cycle which Earthmen will find very difficult to go through. Fire will literally beat down on certain parts of the world, whereas torrents of rain will pour over others. Cataclysms will follow one another for many long years, keeping men frightened. Many will turn towards the Supreme God, beseeching his forgiveness for more and more aberrant behaviors, as well as for the maltreatment imposed on their nourishing mother, the earth. Failure to respect the elements will lead to the effects generating terror among the population at the end of the century. In future ages, the present layout of the continents will be shattered, maps will need revising, yet the creatures inhabiting this planet will have more than enough to do in order to survive rather than dealing with those details. Adam, ATOM, will turn against mankind, who will not have been able to harness it, and its lightning power will be devastating. The time for punishment for a conceit will take place as hard as it can, and man praying for their ancestors' glaring mistakes will suffer without having any control over the situation. This transformation of this planet will go through all these cataclysms in order to be effectively completed, Babaji. Now, there's some other messages I'm not going to read today talking about nuclear power and how it's going to ruin this world. So nuclear power is a part of that. And the solar flare theory by this guy, Matt Stein, and scientific evidence as a possibility. And it's already starting to disrupt the electromagnetic grid. And, I'm saying these things because I've known about them and I believe this stuff is happening. And you see more and more, there's just this post-apocalyptic type of thing, right? The apocalypse that I cover here on this channel, my other channel, there's just something going on that's, it feels like it's the end, right? It's like the end of not the end of the earth or not the end of our lives necessarily, but the end of our lifestyle as we now know it, is collapsing all around us. The politicians, the division, just the moral breakdown, and just how crazy the earth has gotten, how crazy people have gotten. And now, there's this. You think about electricity, how the importance of electricity and, people's daily lives in terms of connecting with other people on the internet, and then just food storage and all the stuff to do with our food system. And, if the electrical grid goes down in any, globally or locally or whatever it is, they'll have devastating results and effects. And, this could be coming sooner than later. And if you haven't started preparing, and I don't know what to do for people, each person has to decide for themselves how to prepare. And certainly prepare just to accept that something like this might happen. If you haven't started to do that, you're kind of screwed. So it's not like, it's kind of late in the game to, adjust yourself to this level. I mean, if you're an older person, and I'm getting into that time, it's just, those kind of changes are going to be hard to do. But, this is potentially there for everybody, and we'll see what happens. But this is, like these things that were predicted and I've known about for a while, that this, potentially could happen or is going to happen, is now getting closer. Like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. It's going to start happening soon, right? You can see it and feel it and whatever. All right, so let's get to the other stuff here. So this is very timely. Somehow we ended up here, Apocalaughs, having to go to work. That's a great quality meme. One of my friends posted this, I think, on Facebook.
He is nuts and clearly disturbed. The Standard. He's angry. Vanity Fair. His own family hates him. The New York Post. He sounds like he's transmitting from another galaxy. He is so crazy. The New York Post. Kennedy is a humorless bully living in a paranoid fantasy. Vanity Fair.
So this goes on for 30 minutes. With some other things here.
If you paid a bill late, you're a deadbeat, and so.
So it's just all these things that he's pushing here. There's a song. He had a parasite, a worm that got into his brain and ate part of it. And my wife and I were joking. Maybe it ate the part of him that hates poops. Right? So just joking. Like a roast-like joke. Not a reflective of my belief system, but it's funny. But anyways, I guess he came out and said he could have 5 worms eating his brain. He'd still beat Biden and Trump in a debate. What a mess this is. But this is, he's trying to present himself as a outsider that's being demonized. But, the ship has sailed based on his, bending over and getting serviced by that guy from Rabbi Shmuley, the guy his daughter sells kosher dongs, right? U.S. Marines official, nearly half of our drones IDF shoots down are its own. So the Israelis are shooting down their own drones. So that's happening. And then Google is co-funding a guaranteed basic income trial that gives families $12,000 a year to help keep them housed. So this is the Agenda 31 housing. And if you haven't noticed this, we've had an influx of people living near us. We live kind of near a big city. And there are all these apartment complexes that look very similar. And they're around where grocery stores are. These 15-minute cities. And underneath the apartments are restaurants and other businesses. And you're seeing more and more of these types of population centers. We have about 50 of them that have gone up. We're just around our area. And they're totally like 15-minute city stuff. And there's one big one where there's all these restaurants, a big grocery store chain, and you could drive to all this stuff within about 5 minutes. And, you wouldn't, it's just the 15-minute cities. And so these things are happening.
I say this as a Holocaust survivor, that the genocide in Gaza is not happening in my name and in our name. The way that the Israeli government is using the memory of the Holocaust in order to justify what they are doing to the Gazans is a complete insult to the memory of the Holocaust. It's an outrage. When I saw the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations putting on a yellow star, or stomach turning, somebody who had to wear a yellow star like myself and my entire family, I'm insulted by that. What distinguishes the Jewish Holocaust is its industrial scale and industrial methods being applied. And what has been happening to Gaza is similar in that the scale of the bombing and the indiscriminate nature of the bombing, the complete lack of care about children and women being...
All right, so I'm going to have to edit out a bunch of the images here, a bunch of disturbing images they're showing. But you can watch the whole video. The one video Israel doesn't want you to see on YouTube. But here's a Holocaust survivor saying that what's happening in Gaza is similar to what he went through. And so, I mean, I'm not going to play the whole video, but you get the idea here. Okay, so my internet sucks. This is called I debated the My Pillow guy and he almost cried. Like low-hanging fruit, bro. Like, it's...
You need help. This kid needs prayer. We need to pray for him. We need to pray for him. We need to pray.
I love it. Keep booing.
Pray for him. We need to pray for
Boo all you want.
Boo all you want. I'm a rebel. I'm here for your boos, you old MAGA people.
Boo all you want. It's okay. You're spending all your money because you've been conned by Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
And he doesn't do that.
Who won Wisconsin, though? Who won Wisconsin?
It has to do with the widespread fraud. I'm telling you, I want the machines gone. God bless you all. I know a lot of you were out in the parking lot, and you probably see me getting attacked by a journalist out there.
That's not a journalist, bro. It's a kid with a microphone and a freaking camera and a phone. And a friend.
Well, you guys, and I thank you for all trying to get involved there, but this is how we get the word out.
How are you doing today, Mr. Lindo?
Good.
How's the My Pillow business going?
Okay, so he's going to he's pretending to be on his side here.
If you remember correctly, or not, actually it was in the winter. It was
Who was Bill Barr appointed by, though?
I mean, it doesn't matter who appointed him.
Because you say Donald Trump picks the best people, but then everyone Donald...
Like, just, like these people have no clue at how clueless they are. I mean, like, the good thing to know is, like, how little you know, right? I'm talking about myself or anybody else. Like, it's just, you have to be comfortable, like, not being in control, knowing what's going to happen, knowing what's going on, really, right? I mean, the deception is so great, and we're so degraded. And these guys pretending like they have a grasp on things.
This widespread...
Talk to Donald Trump about this. Haven't you watched the news? I'm the only one in January of 2021.
Like, why are you trying to talk to him? I mean, he's trying to use it for, like, this guy's trying to convince this guy, Mike Pillow guy. And I don't know what kind of shill this guy is or what. But, this guy's just trying to build a brand and, have his liberal supporters. And it's just, it's worthless, right? You're just a waste of energy. Like, your existence is pointless. It has no value. I mean, just, at least this part of it. On the other hand, flame-throwing robot dog capable of shooting fire up to 30 feet. Now we're getting somewhere. Kaboom. Like, there it is, right? Now we're using technology the way it should be used. I mean, having these guys walked around, the Terminator, walking around shooting fire at people. It just makes sense, right? Like, with the purge coming, you just need, who doesn't need a flame-throwing robot dog? Regulators told to handle failed clearinghouses. Regulators must equip themselves with tools such as bail-in bonds to deal quickly with failed clearinghouses for stock bonds or derivatives without having to call on taxpayers' cash, the G20's risk watchdog said Thursday. So there's going to be another economic collapse is what they're saying here.
There are 5 reasons the chosen ones cannot be around a lot of people.
So I'm going to talk about this in a second. Let's just listen a little bit more of it.
First, their energy is unique. It's like a radio frequency that not everyone can tune into. This unique vibration can cause discomfort for the chosen one when around too many people. Second, they are often empaths. They feel the emotions of others deeply, which can be overwhelming in large groups. Third, they're on a different path. Their journey towards spiritual enlightenment is not a common road, making it challenging to connect with many.
So some of this stuff that I, heard, that goes on, the video goes on from there. The problem is calling people the chosen ones, which is a horrible way to, it's just it shows the lack of any sort of spiritual knowledge or any sort of consciousness. The chosen ones is not, because there's a lot of arrogance and narcissism in the New Age community. And this idea, I'm an indigo child, or I'm a crystal child, or whatever these things are, right? In the Sajmark system, there is going to be, like I said, a genetic mutation. This is the prophecies. And people are going to become, it's going to be a society of saints, where there's been these higher developed souls. We have all this junk DNA, they call it. But it's unrealized potential. And it relates to people's relationship with the divinity within them and a spiritual maturity. And that there's an opportunity now because of the, this is either going to go one way or the other. It's not going to be a middle of the road, riding the fence type of situation. People are going to either evolve or are going to be wiped out completely, or, the de-evolution of the planet or whatever it is, right? It's either going to rise up or we're going to, it's like one of those things, sink or swim. And so there are people who have spiritual tendencies, and they're right about some of the things, or, at least in, theory, about what spiritual people who have a higher level of, vibratory level. I covered this in my last video, the video entitled, let me pull it up here, Silly Little People and Telling Silly Little Lies. That's a great title. But I covered that in that video, right? And, doesn't have very many views as I look at it now. But I guess put it up yesterday. So it's got 3,000 views. So it should have 5,000 before it's, at least, that's the mean. But it's a more important video because of what I talk about, this spiritual renaissance that's happening, right? And, there are people who just are at a higher level, but they're not chosen ones. It's just like anything else. There's people that are above you and below you, right? And you don't want to think about the people above you as chosen ones. I mean, you can respect their accomplishments. You can respect their mastery and their spiritual, their spiritual nature. But you don't want to think of them as chosen ones. Like, it's just this idea when you watch a movie and there's all these NPCs out there in the movie, characters getting killed, extras being killed left and right by the, protagonists, who are the only people that matter are the villains and the protagonists, the characters who have lines, and everyone else is an NPC. And so it's not a chosen one because, in part, it's something you have to choose, right? God's always there, and the spiritual path is available to every single person. God's in everybody and everything. God's everywhere. The way the creation works, the way the world was created, there has to be a basis of creation, right? A media. Like when you're an artist, some people use oil paint, some people are sculptors, some people are whatever it is, right? Use a computer to create artwork. And, the media that you use to create something comes from divine love. Like everything, the original media for all creation is divine love. So everything that has been created is divine at its, base, right? At its original center starting point. Like if you go to the center of anything, you'll find God. But on the periphery, you find ego, you find personality, you find, a heaviness, grossness. Something like a rock, right? Like, that's dense, something that's heavy, something that has a lot of mass to it. And the more subtle you are, the closer you are to the divine, right? So when you shed your body and you're just a soul, you're an etheric being, you're a life form that's energy, based in energy, that is, superior to, or, not superior to, but more subtle than a grosser form of life, and you can get closer to the divine, right? When you penetrate to your spiritual side, you get closer to the divinity within you and divinity as a whole. And that potential exists in all people, but it's service oriented. It's not ego satisfying. You don't feel like a great person. In fact, you shouldn't. You should be humble. As a spiritual person, you need to be humble. You need to be, service oriented. You need to be subservient to God. I mean, you're literally, it's like a master-slave relationship where, the master is a benevolent, energetic, force of divine love, and you're serving that essence of creation, right? But in a, completely submissive way where your ego is bowing down to your soul and, divinity as a whole and saying, please allow me to serve you in any way possible. And you're giving up your freedom of choice. You're giving up your freedom to choose to do the wrong thing. You're giving up your indulgences and, things that you do that you wasting time and wasting energy. I mean, a real saint is just serving God all the time and not indulging in all the pleasures and things that exist on planet Earth. I mean, when those things are a part of their natural existence, sure, right? But it's not an indulgent, creature that is just looking for the next good time and looking for the next, big ego satisfaction. And so that's why people don't do it. Because people want to indulge. People want to make their own choices, make their own mistakes, enjoy making their own mistakes. I mean, look at, people in general, yourself and other people in your lives or, everybody, and think about the mistakes people are making over and over again. Alcoholics, like never, realizing, oh, this stuff is killing me emotionally, physically, it's destroying my life. And they keep on doing it, right? Whatever it might be, right? So any kind of an addict doing the same addictive behaviors and losing their families, losing their lives, having ruined lives, and they can't stop doing it, right? And so that's what people are. An ant just dropped on my bed. There's ants. The big black ants, I think they're carpenter ants, so that's not good. They're in our bathroom and all this stuff. Anyways, and so everything is, has a potential to be spiritual. It's just that people don't choose it. They don't choose it because it's not satisfying to one's ego. And so you might have spiritual potential, but what are you going to do with it, right? And I talk about that and the need to, work on that and just move forward a little bit. If you can't, do the whole enchilada, at least, dip your toe in this world of spirituality. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do anything because it's completely up to each person to choose. But, with everything that happened in the world, it's necessary. And the people who are willing to embrace an attitude of service and connect with the divinity within them and humble their egos are going to be the ones that are going to make it through, this test that we're all undergoing here. So there's no chosen ones. Like this idea of a chosen one, it's like predestined and it isn't, right? You're not chosen, you have to choose, right? Potential's in you, and some people have greater potential, but do you choose it? Is your ego, is your ego humble enough to see the writing on the wall and willing to change? Because you got to be willing to change, and most people don't want to hear that shit, right? Never mind even thinking about doing it or doing it. Let's get back to the other stuff here. So I saw this trailer. YouTube's been recommending trailers to me. I always like to watch trailers. And they're all just so redundant. But when they do come up with something new, it usually sucks. Like they just remake the same storylines and plot lines. And I can't use some of these trailers. I'm tired of just, having to edit these things because they're stupid enough to copyright a trailer. This woman is Dakota Johnson, and this is Sean Penn, the guy who wanted to smelt his Oscar, remember? It's called Daddy-O. There she is. She gets a text message here. But I need you. And he says...
He's married.
I know he's married. I'll drive a cab 20 years and not know people.
So they start off a relationship. And, I'm not going to... There's music in this, so I know they're going to copyright it.
How'd you meet your wife?
She threw up in my cab.
Oh, this is going to suck. Too pretentious. The guy who smelt his Oscar, He was going to smelt his Oscar if they didn't let Zelensky. They didn't invite him to the Academy Awards. He's going to smelt his Oscar. Or then he just gave it to Zelensky because, Zelensky's a great actor. But to add to this, I thought this was a joke trailer, like people make their own trailers. But this is a movie called Dracula, starring Keanu Reeves and Jenny Ortega, who I believe played the Wednesday character in the most recent, show Wednesday. Boom, Universal.
Legend says that the great warrior, who was damned by God himself, now resides in the ancient castle.
No way.
Craving for blood.
Whoa, who is this great warrior?
Sometimes I can't control what I'm doing.
The classic horror story.
No one can escape me.
What do you want from me?
I think your blood. He probably wants your blood. Before mentioned that he's craving blood and you have blood. So maybe your blood. Like, what kind of... Is this all CGI? It's, like, really poorly done.
I have been looking for you for hundreds of years. You
Like, he looks so weird there.
are going to be mine.
They're actually making... This is an actual movie. It's just a love story.
Joe Biden announced hopes for an imminent ceasefire in Gaza while housing an ice cream next to Seth Meyers. And I really hope there is a ceasefire, but the lack of urgency from the US regarding one has been shameful. Especially as just this week, more than 100 people were killed after Israeli forces opened fire on a crowd waiting to get aid from a convoy. And a State Department spokesperson tried to justify America's reluctance to stand up to Israel before being spectacularly corrected by an AP reporter.
The United States does not dictate to Israel what it must do, just as we don't dictate to any country what it must do. We present what we believe are the... We present what...
Unless we invade them.
We believe are the... Good one, Matt. We present... No, I mean, but come on.
Wow! That is brutal! And I so badly want that reporter fact-checking every press briefing from now on. Listen, we'd never support settling in someone else's homeland. Unless they're Native American. Yeah, right. Right, but we'd never bomb innocent civilians unless it's by drone. Fair point, good one. But we'd never destroy their villages unless they're Vietnamese. Oh, come on, Matt! Come on!
The fact that guy would say, we don't tell anybody else what to do. And then the guy says, yeah, unless we invade them. He's like, oh, come on, Matt, come on. Like, come on. Like he's laughing it off like it's funny. We tell countries what to do all the time. We manipulate governments. We just destroyed Libya and took away we did regime change in Libya and tried to do it in Syria. We did in Iraq and we did in Afghanistan and then put in puppet leaders. And we've been doing that for years. CIA has manipulated elections and, killed leaders and assassinated leaders and undermine, whatever it is, undermine democracies. It's kind of our thing, right? And to pretend that we don't do those things and that we don't invade other countries and, we wouldn't tell Israel what to do. But Biden just withheld arms. The problem with Israel is we've been supporting them for years. We've been propping them up financially and militarily, and a lot of Americans aren't into it, and now more than ever. My wife was saying that lots of people think it's a distraction or it's something these protests are manipulated, which of course they are to a certain extent. I said this when I covered the Kyrie Irving thing, and they overreacted to Kyrie Irving's tweet about a movie that he, he posted a link to it that's still available on Amazon that they said was anti-Semitic, but they didn't try to get the movie taken down. Hebrews to Negroes, and so Negroes to Hebrews. I don't know, one of those things. And the movie I watched, it's horrible, but he just posted a link, and they went after him and fined him. It was a whole thing, right? And I was saying that it seemed like all these other groups were getting more attention and getting more victim consciousness. And so the ADL and all these other, various groups that are supporting the rights of Jewish people, all these things, started to ramp up the attention-grabbing type of things, and talking about all these ways that they're being victimized, and everybody wants victim consciousness, and some groups are, it's their whole thing, it's what they do best, right? And so that could be part of these protests or whatever's going on. But America is, on the hook for all these things that Israel wants to do, and they're not cooperating or listening to, or, they're not doing anything, they're not listening to anything that's being said to them by America and these other, countries, the UN, all of it, right? They're just going to go ahead and do it. And I told you they had to do it. This is their last opportunity to grab Gaza, right? To grab, they want all this land. I mean, if they're saying that the Israel was promised to them, the picture that's here is the that's Israel of the Bible. So it's far more than just Israel and these, Gaza and the West Bank. It's, lots more land, but they want all of it. We know they want all of it, right? It's been very obvious about it. And so that's the first piece to it, right? But anyways, there's some other things going on, that I'm not going to cover today. I have them up on my other browser, my other toolbar. But, it's just going to be an ongoing story. This thing with the magnetic poles, I can't imagine that there won't be significant issues, right? Because there's always these things. There's always these doomsday thing, 2012, Y2K, right? End of world stuff. And when it doesn't end, right? Or if there isn't a significant, COVID, even the big event 2001, I mean, these big catastrophic events, life goes on. And you have things that you think are, that you couldn't withstand, like things that happen, loss of a child, right, divorce, things like this. People have their things in their life that, relatives dying, tragedies, things, their own personal apocalypse. And people endure, right? People, pick themselves back up. I mean, sometimes they don't, but in most cases they, people usually don't crumble and fold. And there might be something that happens and people will, and, they give up, they quit, they become alcoholics. But in mass, people in general will, triumph over whatever happens to them. And, so there's that, right? Like, it's been the case, and not just with human beings, but animals. You think about animals, they're constantly losing their homes. Some other animal kicks them out of their home. There's some kind of storm it is, or whatever, natural events, floods, whatever it might be. And, they try to survive. They find a way to survive. Some die, and, they repopulate, and, things keep on going. But there's this idea, too big to fail, that we can't possibly survive what's happening now in the world. Which, in terms of a collapse of our system, like we wouldn't survive without it. Too big to fail, right? And, there are things out there that can make the system fail. And inevitably it will happen. Because it's happened before to every empire, every system like this, right? They fail. Eventually everything dies, everything ends. And, it's happened before. There's been, as far as I know, greater technologically developed civilizations on Earth that no longer are here, that are more advanced than we were, and now they're gone. People lived longer lives. They were superior in some way or another to the slave population that's been left behind here. Like I've talked about my theory about this or my understanding of it. Sometimes it's an act of God, some sort of natural event. Sometimes it's man's own stupid decisions or whatever it is. Sometimes it's like a combination of both, probably a combination of both now. But we're getting close to it. Like, it just seems like that just by the way people are behaving, and like we're getting worse and worse, and just the kids in each generation, how immoral and how twisted people are, and just how low functioning they are, and how they don't have the capacity, entitled, and don't have the capacity to deal with things, and so it looks like there's going to be some major depopulation events, right? And, that's going to happen or not, we'll see. Like, and it looks like it's going to happen. Of course, there's these prophecies that I believe in, and just, it just has this general apocalyptic feel. And, like, there isn't a solution on the horizon. And the solution is that people have to change. People having a solution like, well, if the Republicans would just understand, or if the Democrats would just get it, or if China would just knock it off, or whatever, right? Like, people have these various ways of looking at it and saying, it's the deep state. There's some clown, I think the guy's name is Matt Wallace, and he's some freaking QB, Alex Jonesy kind of profiteering, fake truther or whatever it is. And, then I saw this one post that Twitter recommended, and I clicked on it because I was, the story about Drake. I talked about this before, and it was a bait and switch. And the guy just sucks. I'm like, oh, this guy's horrible. And, there's just people who have these attitudes that it's one group that has to change. We just get rid of the deep state, or we get rid of this or that. People like some of you have that attitude. It's just wishful thinking. People suck right now, and we're getting worse. Like, we've seen it. Each generation gets weaker, more entitled, and just suckier and stupider and, like, just suckier, right? People just suck more and more. And it's not just one, the one group of people or one country or, one demographic. It's collectively. And we're going in the wrong direction. And there's no movement out there of people wanting to change and to reach up to a higher level. And I've talked about the need for spirituality and connect to God, but people's egos don't want any part of that shit, right? And so it seems highly unlikely, right? It doesn't seem like something that is going to happen, like in any way, shape, or form. And so, there's a solution here. It's just people won't accept it or even try it. I mean, do you think they will? Do you think if everyone had to give things up and change and put behind some of their petty little stuff? I mean, people can't even do that to stay married for the kids' sake and for their own sake. And, people can't even give up their, whatever it is. It's small little, petty things and things that are insignificant. They go through pain and suffering, can't get rid of addictions. And, how are they going to make massive changes and rise up to a higher level? I mean, there's no initiative for that. There's no desire for that. People aren't clamoring for that. They don't crave it. They're not looking to better themselves. They're not looking to connect with the divinity within them. They're not looking to be something more than they are. They have their little pleasures. They have their little things that they do. And, we all have it. And we're just looking forward to those things and, getting through the day in some cases. I mean, depending on how miserable people are bankrupt and don't have anything within them just fighting to keep going in their miserable existence. They're depressed, and each generation gets weaker, right? And so, that's where we are as a, culture and a country. And that's when your system collapses, when people themselves become so low functioning that the system has to collapse. But, if there is this reversal of the poles, and apparently, it's really starting to go down to the middle part of the country, like, not all the way down to the south, but people are starting to see the northern lights, which again is, part of this whole pole reversal thing. And if that does exist, and it's something that's coming, and we're in process of doing that, well, of course it's going to mess with if you bring a giant magnet too close to your computer or your, whatever it is, you can easily wipe out the memory, right? Electromagnetic energy and the magnets themselves and solar flares, and, it just causes havoc in a system that's completely dependent on computers and electricity. And then, of course, there's AI. My wife was joking. We were talking about this, and she said, she sent me, the article about the solar flares, and she had sent me something about, Miss USA or whatever had just resigned, and she wrote a cryptic message, hidden message, and then Miss Teen USA resigned. And I covered this on my other channel, just a video that I put up today on Sunday, May 12th. This one will go up tomorrow on the 13th. My wife said, a solar flare taking down the world and Miss USA. It's just, it all becomes like a big blur of, just ridiculousness. But anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.